We got some people joining. Good morning. Hey. How is everyone this morning?
Good.
Do you guys mind if I record this? Your faces might be on there.
No.
It said that I have to ask for permission, so I'm just following instructions. Hi, Jason.
For 2 months, can you guys give us a break?
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Okay, what I would do if I were you, I would look into, go to the lease company, tell them, hey, we got screwed out of 2 months. We cannot do anything till June. You know.
What's up, guys? There's just a bunch of people streaming in, and I'm letting them in one at a time, so I'll get started in a few moments.
That's fine. Is the wind like too loud? Should I take my microphone off?
Yeah, take your mic off, and then if you want to jump in and contribute, you're welcome to turn it back on and shout it out. No, you're good.
Kansas. Okay.
Agreed. Chelsea says it makes sense for you guys just to mute unless you want to contribute actively. That way we can avoid like extraneous noise from the environment / my echo. There we go. That's quiet. So how's everyone been sleeping? Now you guys can talk. Whoop sounds judgy.
Hello, is anybody there?
Hello. Guys, I'm just waiting a few moments for people to join in before we start. I'm going to ask everyone to mute for the majority of the time. You're welcome to join the discussion and contribute or ask questions, but you'll just unmute when you want to do that. And I'm going to spend the first part talking through some ideas as well as some ways that you can start to work on improving your own sleep and why that's important. And then at the end, we can talk about it a little bit and, discuss some individual considerations, because sometimes, the nature of our work and lifestyle affects how realistic it is to get into things. Good morning, John. I see you just joined us.
Good morning.
How you doing over there?
I am good. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good. Just stuck in my four walls. I'm going to start in like 1 minute.
Cool.
Actually, maybe now would be a good time. If you guys had anything in particular you really wanted to dig into, toss that into the chat box, and I can, as I'm going through some of the content I already have prepared, we can kind of veer off a little bit into discussion when we get to something that's relevant to that. John, Chelsea's really happy to see you or hear you.
Settle down, Chelsea. Settle down.
Well, that was insinuated by your capitalization. That or you're disgusted by the idea, which I can't fault you for.
Okay, so.
All right. All right, let's dive in. So sleep. Why are we talking about sleep? Letting someone in here. So why are we talking about sleep? Obviously, I'm the nutrition guy, and that's the main part of, or that's the main thing I've been discussing with my clients, obviously, and in these webinars. But I tend to think of sleep as part of nutrition, because a lot of the challenges that people have for which they seek advice in nutrition have to do with the fact that there's an imbalance between what they're asking from their body and what they're giving back. And we think of nutrition as giving back to our body or as a vehicle to achieve certain performance or body composition goals, right? And I think a big theme in the way that I approach things is thinking about nutrition and lifestyle factors as something that adds to your life rather than takes away from it. And using nutrition as a tool to give back to your body is extremely important. And one of the most effective ways that you can restore, recover, and give back after asking a lot from your body and mind is sleep. And I regularly say with clients that I think sleep is actually probably more important than the food piece. Overall, like if we were just to consider it pound for pound, but it's also useful to think of it as sleep kind of enables what we want from nutrition to do its thing, right? Like I've had experiences with clients where the thing that was limiting them from seeing the performance improvements or body composition improvements wasn't really so much the food, or at least that wasn't the true cause of the problem. It really boiled down to lack of consistency and quality sleep, and finding improvements there was more than enough to create a series of changes. Like finding, I'm just going to step back for a second. So finding improvements there with those clients was enough to create a series of changes that actually led to the outcomes that they were looking for specifically from their nutritional efforts. So for that reason, I think sleep is super, super important, especially in the CrossFit community because of the nature of workouts that we do and how they, each day we're putting unique stresses on our body by virtue of the type of training that it is, right? Like CrossFit's designed to change it up day to day. And in so doing that, you're exposing yourself to unique physical stresses, which I think, can be productive as long as you're matching that stress with recovery efforts. And sleep is a huge part of that. So that's why it's important. That's why I'm having this discussion. And because it's, there's some deep physiological content here, which lends well to my background in education. So I thought I'd take the reins on this one. So I'm going to start by going through some things that I think everyone should know about sleep so that you can understand the ideas better, right? Like it's one thing for me to tell you like, oh, don't drink coffee after 2 p.m. or, turn your phone off 30 minutes before bed. But both of those things are not things that you want to do. So if I can get you to understand why I think those things are important and how they affect you and the quality of your life, then I think you're more likely to actually do the things necessary to improve your sleep and see the benefits. So in terms of sleep, if you were to do a sleep study, they would be monitoring the architecture of your sleep, which means that they would be looking at how much time you spend in different sleep stages. There are two main ones that I want to focus on for this discussion. We can think this is kind of an oversimplification, but you fall asleep and most people will go through this period of light sleep, which is kind of like this sort of half awake, half asleep thing that I'm sure we're all familiar with. Then we go into slow wave sleep, which some people or some tracking devices characterize as deep sleep. And then we have REM sleep, the rapid eye movement sleep. Slow wave sleep and REM sleep are both critical to recovering from what we expose ourselves to each day. The slow wave sleep is the physically restorative aspect of sleep. So when you're breaking down muscle tissue in the gym, you recover much of that during slow wave sleep. Something like 90 to 95% of human growth hormone, like endogenous natural human growth hormone, is produced during that phase of sleep. And what HGH does is, it takes care of maintenance and production of tissues and organs, really. So we need that, and insufficient slow wave sleep can essentially mean incomplete physical recovery from whatever you're doing with your body, right? And this is why I always say that the best athletes in the world are often the best sleepers in the world, right? MK, are you still here?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
MK. I always use MK as an example here because I think it's comical what an excellent sleeper she is. I've seen her just like literally been able to pass out on the couch at the gym with like really loud music and things going on all around her. Would you agree with this assessment? Would you consider yourself a good sleeper?
Definitely.
How much do you sleep per night?
I usually get at least I usually get at least 7 hours, and then I like 7, like if I can get 7.5 to 8, like that's good then.
Cool. Do you have a hard time falling asleep, or do you fall asleep quickly?
No, I fall asleep pretty quickly, thankfully. Cool. Like under 5
minutes. Okay, yeah. So I'm guessing that you're able to get into slow wave sleep pretty quickly and spend a good amount of time in the important physical recovery aspects of sleep. I mean, I think I'm not sure if everyone here knows MK. If you don't, MK, she goes to South Loop here in Chicago, and she qualified for the CrossFit Games as an individual this year. So she's, I guess, a good example of someone who has figured out how to meet the demands of her training. So yeah, thanks, MK. I might ask you for your thoughts again if you're cool with that. If you have to go, that's cool though.
No, good.
So we have that slow wave sleep, and then we have REM sleep, and that's REM stands for rapid eye movement. It's actually a more physically active type of sleep. It's not really relevant, but if you were to monitor your activity during REM sleep, it would be you'd actually be more moving a little bit and fidgeting and twitching compared to slow wave sleep. So if REM is if slow wave sleep is the physically restorative part of sleep, we can think of REM as the cognitive restoration phase, right? So spending a good amount of time in REM sleep affects mental acuity, sharpness, memory consolidation, which is why cramming in school has never been an effective strategy. I mean, it gets the job done, but if you cram for something, you stay up late studying, great, you write the exam, and it's kind of stored in your short-term memory. But because you didn't get sufficient sleep, the lack of REM sleep prevents you from consolidating any of those ideas into long-term memory. So if I were to ask you a month later about some of the complex subjects that you were tested on in school, you wouldn't remember a damn thing, right? Because we're relying primarily on short-term memory for that. So REM sleep, mental restoration, acuity, and memory and stuff like that. Slow wave sleep, physical restoration, increases in HGH production, and both of them absolutely essential for long-term health and avoidance of chronic disease. So we've all heard of this idea of a circadian rhythm. What is that, and why does it matter? We can think of it as a cycle of changes in our biology that happen over a 24-hour period. And it essentially regulates sleep. It interacts with melatonin, which is something we're all familiar with. We've probably heard of and tried melatonin supplements. We'll talk about those at some point and how I don't think they're necessarily useful. The way that circadian rhythm is managed is primarily in response to light and routine, right? Daylight is the main cue that sets that rhythm because it's the only predictable thing that humans have been exposed to every single day for human history, all of us, right? So it makes sense that we'd evolve this strategy for like wakefulness and sleeping based on that rhythm. What happens is when it gets bright outside, it basically tells our body to stop producing melatonin, right? Melatonin is that sleep-inducing hormone, and it creates sleep. And you know, when the light comes in and we block the production of melatonin, wakefulness happens, right? That's how we wake up in the morning. Now, actually, I'll just talk about the melatonin thing since it's relevant here. But essentially, melatonin is a hormone, which means it's like a chemical messenger. What it does is it tells other things in the body what to do. And so it basically regulates the sleep machinery. So all of the things that need to happen and change in your body when you go to sleep are basically given the instructions to do their thing from this hormone melatonin, which we produce naturally. And influencing the natural production of melatonin is going to be a big part of the strategies I'm going to discuss towards, you know, in like 10, 15 minutes when we get through this background. So there are a lot of things that'll hijack sleep, and many of them have to do with the way they interact with the natural production of melatonin. Now, there's this other idea of sleep pressure, which is essentially this constant acclimation of, you can think of it as like fatigue. The longer you're awake, the more sleep pressure is building. What it actually is a buildup of a chemical called adenosine in your brain. And that's what caffeine interacts with. So when you're awake, you've got this adenosine accumulating. That's sleep pressure. And you know when your sleep pressure is high because you want to friggin' pass out, right? We've all been there. Anytime you felt really tired, that's a reflection of sleep pressure exceeding the amount of time you've slept. The way that caffeine works is it interferes with adenosine. We've got receptors on our brain that adenosine latches onto and makes us feel sleepy, right? And the greater the sleep pressure, the more of this chemical, the more sleepy we feel. Caffeine works because it fits right into that little receptor and essentially blocks the effect of adenosine on making you sleepy. So caffeine like basically makes you feel less sleepy because it stops the thing that makes you feel sleepy from doing its thing. An important thing to note about caffeine is that it stays in your system for a while. Now, some of my clients that I've worked with are here, and I was doing a little bit of additional research just to make sure that everything I was saying today was legit, and that, you know, if there have been some updates to some of the ideas I've had that I, you know, recognize them. And I think I've said that the half-life of caffeine is somewhere around 8 hours. As it turns out, the majority of the research seems to suggest it's in the 5 to 7 hour range. The difference there is because people metabolize caffeine differently, right? So still, that's significant. 5 to 7 hours. When we're thinking about the impact of caffeine, which we'll discuss in a bit, we should think about it from the perspective of, if I'm not like an excellent caffeine metabolizer, which is hard to really know for sure, unless you get a number of complex and expensive tests. But if you are not, I think it's worth assuming that you're not good at it and that the half-life is going to be 7 hours. What that means is that half of the caffeine you've consumed 7 hours ago is still in your bloodstream, right? So if I have a cup of coffee from Starbucks, which is notorious for having somewhere around 200 milligrams of caffeine, which is a really significant amount, and I have that at 1 p.m., it's plausible that at 8 p.m., there will still be 100 milligrams of caffeine in my bloodstream. And so that's still impacting whether or not I feel the effects of the adenosine and the sleepiness. Okay, I had a specific question about this. Hold on, I have to bring up this thing. First of all, Kyla, I saw your question, and that's a really good one. And I will specifically answer that question because I think that's a concern that a lot of people have. So I will talk to that. Hopefully you're able to stick around. If not, I am recording this so you can review it later, but I will specifically address that. And Zana, does caffeine metabolism equate to your overall tolerance? I think I understand what you're asking. So are you saying that like you develop a tolerance to caffeine in the same way that you do other substances? That's true, yes. But metabolism is the process by which we to just essentially think of it, let's think of metabolism as the time it takes for your body to clear the caffeine from your bloodstream, okay? And tolerance is more about the amount of caffeine that affects you. So it doesn't really change the time. You just maybe have less of an effect at 8 p.m. compared to someone who's just having caffeine for the first time. I don't know if there's an influence on how long it takes to metabolize based on how much caffeine you drink and how often and how consistently, which is a factor related to tolerance. I don't know the answer to that. I would imagine that it's possible, but I do know that a lot of people think that they're good at dealing with caffeine and think that they can sleep after having an espresso after dinner. My dad, for example. And humans are just really bad at judging how things affect us. We're also very good at getting used to not feeling our best. So it's often the case that people will justify the consumption of caffeine late in the day by saying, I can still go to sleep and I still feel good. But when you actually convince those people to try eliminating or to try implementing a hard cutoff time on their caffeine, which we'll discuss maybe around 1 p.m. or something, within 3 or 4 days, when I've done this with clients, I'm getting text messages that are just like, wow, I'm sleeping way better and I have way more energy. And I've been extremely naive to this caffeine thing. If only I could get my dad to actually try that, that would be great, because he's convinced that he's just like this Portuguese old man immune to caffeine consumption during the day. He also claims that wine never makes him drunk. But if anyone has old Southern European parents or grandparents, I'm sure that resonates with you. So yeah, keep that in mind. So half of the caffeine you drink is still going to be in your bloodstream 5 to 7 hours later. So exercise is something that's relevant to many of you. And exercise affects sleep in a number of different ways, right? One of the mechanisms by which exercise creates health improvements, which we know exercise contributes to a healthy lifestyle, is because regular exercise tends to increase the amount of time that you sleep, and not only total time, but the time spent in the restorative phases of sleep. So you potentially get into slow wave sleep faster, and you spend more time in both slow wave and REM sleep. there's a lot about sleep that we don't understand yet, because it's sort of mysterious and we're learning more and more and more. But one of the theories behind why that's the case is that sleep takes us to a place that's pretty much the opposite biologically. Exercise. Exercise takes us to a place that's the opposite biologically from sleep, right? Activation of our sympathetic fight or flight response, right? All of these things, increased body temperature, breakdown of stored energy for, in your muscle tissue to be used for muscle contraction, heavy breathing. I always joke about, if you look at someone in the middle of a CrossFit workout, their face is always something like this, right? And that's the face of sympathetic arousal. Our body is constantly trying to achieve homeostasis, which is a rebalancing of specific deviations from that status quo. And through exercise, we intentionally introduce stresses which cause us to deviate from, that normal balance, homeostatic, like regulatory state. And that's an important thing to do. But what happens is when we go in one direction, to recover, we go extra in the other direction. So a lot of the things necessary to recover from exercise involve, lowering your body temperature, moving into the parasympathetic side or the rest and digest side of your nervous system. And these happen to be the same changes that happen in the evening when we're preparing for the onset of sleep. So that's one of the reasons that exercise can be useful. But, and you knew there was a but coming, exercise close to bedtime, and depending on the intensity, can affect your ability to fall asleep and may interrupt time spent in both slow wave and REM sleep, which are both the physically and mentally restorative phases, respectively. As we know, right, very intense exercise can leave us feeling kind of crappy, right? Think about a really hard CrossFit workout where you laid on the ground for 20 minutes afterwards, just staring at the ceiling and, regretting all of your life choices. During that time, there's a lot going on inside. And there's excess production of your stress hormone, which is kind of like antagonistic to melatonin, right? Cortisol, that stress hormone, also happens to be highest in the morning when we wake up. So it's more associated with waking and alertness than it is with sleep. And one of the challenges with very intense exercise where you push yourself really, really hard, or if you're training, towards the end or towards that end of the spectrum characterized by overtraining and maybe asking more from your body than you're giving back, like we talked about at the beginning, you're producing more cortisol from that as a result. And that may interfere with sleep. As it turns out, Kyla, that's probably one of the variables, not necessarily the exercise, but the impact of those chemical hormonal changes associated with intense exercise. They may be causing you to wake up before you want to in the middle of the night. And I will address that because that's something that I've struggled with significantly. The reason I wanted to talk about this is because I used to be a really bad sleeper, and it really impacted my training, my recovery, my injury risk. And so, it wasn't even a matter of knowing the things that I needed to do. It was a matter of doing the things that I needed to do. And then when I did them, I realized the massive impact that they had. And so in true Dan fashion, I got really nerdy about it and started learning about it and coming up with behavioral strategies to help improve the quality of other people's lives as well, which I'll get to in a moment. So exercise, like everything, like regular, consistent exercise done with an appropriate intensity relative to your recovery abilities, and done not too close to bedtime will probably help improve sleep, right? If you're kind of pushing the envelope, if you're asking more from your body through exercise than you're giving back through nutrition and just like chilling out for a second and sleeping regularly, then that ironically may actually negatively affect your ability to fall asleep and get quality sleep. So it depends. I think there's also an important relationship between sleep and nutrition, which is probably pretty relevant right now. I'm hearing a lot about people talking about like boredom eating and stress eating and just like concerns about putting on large amounts of weight because they're moving significantly less and they're just kind of like grazing on food all day. That's real. Stress eating is real. But I think that part of this can be influenced by the relationship between sleep and nutrition. So for one thing, studies on sleep deprivation show that our mental or cognitive priorities when it comes to dealing with decisions in everyday life are more short-term reactivity based in sleep deprived. Like if you're sleep deprived, your focus in decision making is in the short term and reacting to circumstances that are presented to you. People who get sufficient sleep and adequate sleep do a better job of considering the long-term implications of their decision and making decisions that are aligned with, who they would like to be in the future, that consider where they want to go on their goals. So we've all been in this place where it's like, 5:30 on a Thursday evening, and you have the choice to make a healthy dinner aligned with your goals or order in some tacos. And even though you've been telling yourself that whole day that you're going to make a healthy dinner and stick to your plan, in the moment when that hunger kicks in, because you hadn't really thought ahead to when you're going to start cooking, you realize you haven't started cooking and you order the tacos, right? You're more likely to make that sort of decision in a state of sleep deprivation. Whereas someone who sleeps regularly is literally more likely to do the things that they need to do or sleeps well regularly in order to make the decisions, or, they're more likely to make the decisions and do the things that they need to do in order to reach their goals, because they're able to abstract from the current situation and think about the relationship between their decisions and their future state. One other thing to consider is sleep disturbance and deprivation significantly impacts the hormones that govern appetite, right? I'm trying to not go so deep with the science, but think of it this way. We've got a hormone that increases hunger and appetite and one that decreases or suppresses it. And they're constantly working together. And there's been a significant body of research that indicates that the appetite stimulating hormone exists in higher concentrations than normal. And the one that says, I'm good, we don't need to eat anymore, is lower than normal in cases of people who are not getting enough sleep on a regular basis. So one of the prominent theories for the obesity epidemic is, all of these changes to modern life that have negatively impacted our ability to get quality sleep, and how that might be influencing people's decision-making in a way that's making them overweight and making it difficult for them to stay healthy and get to the gym and do the things they need to do in order to, become the person that they want to be from like a nutrition and fitness perspective. So a couple more things, and we'll talk about like how to actually get better. So, if any of you who've kind of followed me knows that I talk about consistency a lot in a bunch of different contexts. Consistency is this idea of, continuing to show up, but it's also about an important biological principle, right? We talked about circadian rhythm, and one of the most important elements of developing a healthy and useful circadian rhythm that helps you get good quality sleep is consistency in your sleep. So consistency is extremely important for circadian rhythm management and sleep quality. And the type of consistency I'm referring to is the time and environment around your sleep. So do you go to bed at the same time? Do you wake up at the same time? Not literally like the exact same time, like 10:03, but like around there. Do you have like a structured start and end point in your mind, those like goalposts that you strive for each day? Do you create conditions to hold yourself to those? Because that is probably one of the most powerful things you can do to improve your sleep and consequently, the quality of your life. It's important to recognize that unlike food and nutrients, we can't stockpile sleep, right? Like when you eat more than you need, you store that, right? And sometimes you store it even in other cases. But we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. You can't like stock up on sleep, right? Your body will sleep until you've slept enough, and then it's just like, okay, time to wake up. So it's on you to do the best you can each night. Now, don't feel pressured by that, because you are resilient and you will get by without perfect sleep. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't do the things necessary to try and maximize the quality of your sleep night to night. Because unfortunately, you can't like cram for sleep. You can't sleep 12 hours one night so that you can be alert for 72 hours after that. You know what I mean? Or 48 hours or whatever the case may be. So consistency in sleep is super important. And there's a lot of interesting research on that. A lot of research that's done on college students, because research is being done in colleges and universities, and undergraduates are basically cheap labor. So there's a famous study that basically showed that students who were consistent with their sleep times compared to those that were not, without changing the amount that they slept, right? They controlled for that. They said they made sure that the consistency kids were sleeping, pretty much on average the same amount as the inconsistent kids. But there was a statistically significant increase in GPA with the sleep consistency student group, right? And when we see things like that, right, how we see, athletic performance improvements that are just massive when it comes to consistent and quality sleep and sleep time and stuff like that. Sometimes people are like, oh, well, I'm not a basketball player. I'm not a professional basketball player, or I'm not an undergraduate student. I don't need to worry about my GPA. But I think those are extremely telling about the impact of sleep on, the human organism, right? And the thing with sleep is like, it affects every system in our body. So that's honestly the main reason I would argue that it's more important than food. Food, the nutrition thing is key, but without sleep, sometimes it doesn't do what it needs to do. With sleep, it works remarkably, right? So it's not the other way around, right? Like you can't, anyway, let's not go down that hole. You get the point there. Incredibly important. So how much do we need, and how do you know if you're sleeping enough? This is a tough question, and this is something that's not super well understood. We know objectively that for the vast majority of people, like 99.5 or 9, I don't know the percentage, but you're probably not the exception to this. Let's put it that way. Objectively speaking, less than 6 hours for most people is not enough sleep, right? For many, less than 7 is not enough, but not necessarily, right? It also depends on the quality of your sleep and the recovery demands on your body. So if you're regularly sleeping less than 6 hours, I can almost guarantee you that you're leaving some performance, either in terms of, physical performance or mental clarity and acuity on the table, right? And chances are that you're experiencing, if you're someone who's CrossFitting regularly, like aches and pains, joint discomfort, an inability to like really bring it in workouts and find intensity, if that's something that you strive for on a daily basis. Honestly, more than 10 hours, remember we said our body just kind of wakes us up when we've had enough. So if you're sleeping more than 10 hours, that, that's often a comorbidity or associated, like a correlation between sleeping more than 10 hours on a regular basis with some pretty dubious health conditions or mood disorders like depression. So if that's something that you're experiencing, talk to me, and I wanna guide you to some help for that. And or if you don't want to talk to me, let me know, and I can just connect you with people who might be a better fit for you to talk to, because that's a good starting point. So do understand that as you get older, you tend to get less sleep, right? And we just become less effective and efficient at sleeping. So we got to stay in bed a little bit longer in order to get the sleep necessary. And that's why sometimes if you have the time to do so, even if you wake up at like 4:30 or 5 a.m. and you're raring to go, if you stick it out for like 15 minutes and you just kind of sit there annoyed that you're awake, if you think you're able to fall asleep again, it might be worthwhile. So how do we know if we're sleeping enough, and how do we improve that? I think it's extremely important to monitor biofeedback, which is just listen to the signals you're getting from your body, right? Are you tired? First of all, if you're feeling like you're ready for a nap sometime between like 11 and 2 p.m., you're probably not getting enough sleep. You might be not ever feeling that way, but also heavily relying on caffeine. And remember that caffeine is basically blocking that specific sensation. So pay attention to that. Pay attention to how your workouts feel, right? Are you sore if you're working out regularly? Do you feel like you're regularly not able to perform at the level of your expectations? This could be an indication of, sleep deficiency, or also nutritional deficiencies too. Often just like not eating enough, which is also necessary to recover fully from your workouts, right? Are you happy, healthy, and horny, as some people like to say? That's an incredible important test of the state of your physiology and health. And sleep is a massive factor on that. If those things don't feel right, I would say sleep is a good place to start in rooting out the nature of the issue. Now, how can we go about improving sleep? What do we need to do? Like, what actions do we need to take? So we talked about sleep consistency, right? And we've all heard of the idea of a bedtime routine, and it sounds kind of corny perhaps, but it's probably the most effective way to build consistency. Why? Because by doing the same thing at a similar time each night, you create behavioral and environmental cues that reinforce the circadian rhythm and make it robust and effective. So when you get used to turning your phone off 30 minutes before bed, brushing your teeth, opening up a book, or stretching without looking at ROMWAD, I'll get to that in a second, or something like that on a screen. As you're doing those things, because you've done those several nights before at the same time, there's like a predictive effect. And your body, I talk about the body very anthropomorphically, but it's just, I feel like it helps people connect to the idea a little bit better. Essentially what happens is when you do those things, it cues your body to start doing the sleep stuff, right? So literally turning off your phone and brushing your teeth could be the thing that increases melatonin concentrations in your blood and starts getting you to the place where you can actually pass out quickly. So creating routine and consistency through like an intentional bedtime routine, which I'll suggest in a moment, and consistent time is very, very, very powerful, right? As a suggestion for a nighttime routine, 30 minutes is a good start. Turn off your phone and TV. Light impacts sleep. Like we said, the main thing that governs the circadian rhythm is light. We have photosensitive cells, so light receptive cells, obviously in our eyes, but also in other parts of our body like our skin. And when they are recognizing artificial lights, and honestly, this does technically include like light bulbs and electricity, right? Like, and obviously we can't do a perfect job of this, but you know, when it does that, it makes it harder to fall asleep. And one of the things that impacts that the most is artificial light from digital screens like TVs and your phone. And I think one of the biggest things that people struggle with when it comes to sleep is looking at their phone in bed, right? So that light may literally be preventing the production of melatonin and making you not sleepy. And I hear all the time from clients that even though they're tired, they're literally just laying in bed till 3 a.m. And then I ask them, well, what are you doing? I'm like, nothing. No, but like, what are you doing? You're looking at Instagram, aren't you? Yes, I am looking at Instagram. That's why you're not sleeping. And you are addicted to your phone, and so am I. And I'm not judging you because we all are, and it's highly addictive. But if you want to be a healthier, more productive human, both of us need to be better at turning our phones off. 30 minutes is a good start. Turn it off, turn your computer off, turn your TV off. After that, do a series of events of your choosing. Brushing your teeth is highly recommended. That you can implement consistently each night to help create those behavioral cues that'll reinforce your circadian rhythm, so that by the time you're laying in bed and you open up your book, you'll be 2 pages in and you'll be ready to pass out. And if you look at research on bedtime routines and nighttime routines, you'll see that sleep latency, the amount of time that it takes to fall asleep and the amount of time that it takes to get into slow wave sleep, which is typically the first stage of sleep. I mean, it should be. I think it's abnormal if you go right into REM sleep. But the time that it takes to go into the restorative phases of sleep is much less, because you've created this cue that says it's time to do the thing where we recover, right? So light is super impactful, and incorporating that into a bedtime routine is super powerful. On that note, it's good to think about whether city lights affect you, right? Like I have a street lamp right outside my window. I have blackout blinds. And if you are someone who's affected by city lights like that, if you live in a busy part of the city, I highly recommend investing in blackout blinds. Especially if you're someone who generally sleeps later, right? There's a genetic component to sleep, which definitely determines your tendency to be like a morning person or an evening person. And if you're someone who has a tendency towards like going to bed later and waking up earlier or waking up later, blackout blinds are almost essential. They're not cheap. I mean, they can be cheap, but get a good pair that actually prevents light from coming in. You can also do that with an eye mask. Everyone laughs at me, but I always wear an eye mask. I think it's like a safety blanket for me. And it's weird to have something on your face for the first time when you're trying to sleep. or in your ears if you wear earplugs or something like that. But if you just choose to go with it, it quickly becomes normal. And now I can't actually imagine not having like a sleep mask on. Although I don't wear it on planes because that just freaks me out. I want to know what's going on and be able to see if I need to quickly. But yeah, blacking things out, super important. Also, the lamp beside you. I know this seems like we're splitting hairs at this point, but it can be impactful. One thing that I did about a year ago is pick up a dimmer for my lamp. Actually, I got that Philips Hue light bulb for my bedside lamps because it comes with a dimmer for that specific bulb, so I can control it without changing the architecture of the actual lamp. So that's been really useful. I can dim the lamp, get into bed, pick up a book, and honestly, I very rarely read very much. Like I'd like to, but after like 2-3 pages, I'm about ready to pass out. So the book thing has become more of a cue for me to get into good quality sleep than it is about like actually reading. But it seems to be the most common choice for people who are trying to replace their phone. A couple other things. Body temperature. One thing that it signals your circadian rhythm is your core body temperature. And during sleep, your core body temperature is lower. And during the lead up and onset of sleep, your body temperature is dropping. So if you are in an artificially heated environment and you're keeping the temperature high, you might actually be preventing one of the critical cues for sleep onset. So I personally always set the thermostat to 65 before bed. And I found that to be really, really perfect for sleep onset. And that might seem cold to some people, but honestly, it's really, really powerful. That's something that's been one of those like magic clicking things for some of my clients where it's just like, wow, I didn't realize that, I hate being cold. So my room was at like 74. And as soon as I turned it down, I just passed out instantly. So it's powerful. Obviously, we talked about exercise. It can go either way. But, if one of the things that many people will notice, especially people who are regularly active at the gym, is if they take some time off, it really impacts their ability to sleep because it's a huge factor in sleep onset for you, right? So, but also be aware of how working out very close to your bedtime and how the intensity of that exercise may be influencing your ability to fall and stay asleep, okay? And then, a lot of people talk about supplements, and I know that people have questions about this because there are some things you can do to help you to support these behavioral strategies. Kind of like with food, supplements work when the diet as a whole is already well-rounded. It adds that extra like couple percent. Without, a strong foundation in the diet as a whole, the supplements don't really add value and just, are kind of expensive wastes of money for many people. I think that you are going to get the most value on improvements in sleep from the bedtime routine and considerations with light and temperature. Okay. But also I've got one more piece, and Kyle, if you're still here, I'm going to dig into this in a second. There are some things like if you're magnesium deficient, which is surprisingly common right now because the main source of magnesium in the diet is, fresh plant foods, and people are really bad at eating their vegetables. So many people are magnesium deficient. Taking a magnesium supplement can be helpful in sleep onset and producing better quality sleep for longer. And then one of the things that I think impacts people, like Kyla, who mentioned that she wakes up pretty early before she wants to and before she's recovered. This is often the case with people who have very high levels of stress in their life. And the easiest way to think about it is in terms of that stress hormone cortisol, which is associated with waking, right? Cortisol should come down throughout the day, right? If we look at a healthy human and their concentration of the stress hormone in their bloodstream throughout the day, it should be highest when they wake up, because it kind of accompanies that circadian waking response, and then it kind of tapers out throughout the day. But through many different types of stress, many of which are like emotional and work related, and the nature of just like having a career in a big city today, most people have much higher stress levels, and we see, almost chronically elevated cortisol. This is a bit of an oversimplification, but I think it starts to help people understand things. You add in intense exercise, especially done with insufficient recovery and insufficient food to fuel the exercise and then recover from it, and we see more cortisol production, right? And so you may get to that threshold point in the evening where you're able to fall asleep, but because that curve of cortisol has been kind of pushed up altogether by the circumstances of your life, you will wake up artificially because of that, right? It has the potential to disturb your sleep in the middle of the night. There's a couple things you can try. The first thing to note is go down a YouTube hole, searching things like mindfulness-based stress reduction, diaphragmatic breathing, stuff like that, because there's a lot of evidence, and it's actually being taught in medical schools now, which I think is cool, breathing strategies, because a certain type of breathing, like proper deep breathing, actually creates chemical and neurological changes in your body, which are associated with reductions in cortisol levels. And so implementing something like breathing or meditation or structured practices like that as part of your bedtime routine is a good way to start to target that, like waking up way earlier than you should, probably because of the imbalance of stress to recovery in your life. And I'm saying recovery not just in terms of exercise, but in terms of giving back to your body from everything you ask of it. Something that has been effective, and this is just pure anecdote from my experience with clients, there's an herbal supplement called ashwagandha. It's hard to spell. Just email me or text me if you want me to give you some information about that. It's like many effective supplements, probably overused, and people, this is the cure to my issue. It can help you fall back asleep. I've dealt with this before, and I've personally found it effective. When I wake up at 4:35 in the morning and I know I need to get some sleep, I'll take 1 or 2 of those with some water, go to the bathroom, and I'll be back asleep in like 8 to 12 minutes or something like that. So that can be effective because the research does indicate that it decreases cortisol concentration in the blood shortly after taking it. So try that out, and I'd be happy to continue this discussion. Oh, I just noticed some other chat stuff. Okay, people just saying they got to run. But yeah, I have to run too, actually. We're coming up on the time. But please feel free to reach out to me. If you don't have my email, I will leave it for you now. All right, guys, I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you all again soon. I don't know what my next one will be, but I'm sure I'll be back here chatting about something soon.
Thanks, Dan.
No problem.
Appreciate it.